Welcome to Speak Out, Stand Out by Green Communications, where we're learning how to help our kids become better communicators. We believe our voices are the strongest asset we have, and our mission is to empower the next generation to use their voices to make a difference in the world around them. Whether you are a parent, an educator, or are just invested in today's youth, we hope this podcast will help you build confidence in our future, one voice at a time. Welcome back to Speak Out, Stand Out. I'm Elizabeth Green, and today's guest is Stephanie Hewitt. Stephanie is a postpartum parent educator and sleep coach who offers private coaching to families with little ones and older ones. But she really focuses on those young babies and helping parents adjust in those early years. She also works with families all over the world to help parents reduce anxiety, find a schedule that works for them, and get the rest that they need to live their best lives, which we know is so incredibly important. And Stephanie is very well versed in these things at home as well because she's a mama to 4 kids in addition to that. So Stephanie, thanks so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
So Stephanie, I just, told a little bit about your background, but how did you end up where you are as a parent coach? What led you down that path?
I have 4 kids. My husband and I joke a lot that we're just doing a lot of parenting right now. I have kids ages almost 18 down to 5. And my first 3 are 5 years apart. And then we had one more about 7 years later. And I love being a mom. They've been like the joy of my life. And in the last couple of years, each one of them had their own sleep problems. And I've noticed that sleep translates into other things. So if they're not sleeping well, they're not eating well. If they're not sleeping well, then we have behavior problems. If they're not sleeping well, anxiety is higher. And so with each kid, I saw this happen in a different way. But, 18 years ago, nobody was talking about sleep coaching. Nobody was talking about parent coaching. We didn't, literally, I feel like I'm 100 years old. We didn't have social media back then, when I was a new mom.
Right.
And now, when I had my last one back in 2018, I had this world of resources. It was a completely different parenting experience. And so she got pneumonia and RSV when she was about 6 months old. And our sleep went out the window, as it does. She was sick. So I was up in her room in the middle of the night, sleeping on my chest, holding her, breathing treatments, all the things. And after she was well, the doctor cleared her. Her breathing was stabilized. We still were not sleeping. And I had 3 other children. And I said to my husband, I can't keep doing this. And I don't know how to get back on track. And I'm totally overwhelmed. And so we hired a sleep consultant, and it changed our lives. Just having somebody that I could talk to that knew me, that knew my child. I wasn't Googling something. It was a human being. And after my experience with that, I was like, all the parents need to know that they don't have to do this by themselves, that sleep is huge, that you don't have to be the quintessential exhausted parent. It doesn't have to be that way. And so I started doing it, and I love it. It's fun.
That's awesome. And I think that it's important what you said too, is that you were working with an individual, because every baby is different. Every family is different. And there are so many methods out there, but they're not all going to work for you, or you're not all going to be comfortable with all of them. So I think that that's really important, the personalized aspect of it when we're navigating something like this. And obviously, if it's not just that the baby's not sleeping and it's affecting their behavior, it's us too, right?
Yes.
And it certainly comes out in all the ways. So super important. And today we want to talk a little bit about behavior and boundaries and things like that, but really more on the parent side and ways that we can be the best parents that we can be and teach our kids great, solid communication skills with our examples. And one of the main things we're going to focus on today is setting and holding boundaries. So I'm really excited about this. I feel like this is another one of those things that, when we have babies, there are some things that come instinctually. There's a lot that doesn't.
So true.
I feel like for me personally, this is one of those conversations that I have to learn how to set and hold boundaries in my entire world, but especially as a mom. So how important is it, first of all, that we dive into this, but how important is it that we have boundaries for us personally and for our kids?
So I love that question because when I work with a toddler family or older, the sleep is actually secondary. And I get contacted by parents primarily for sleep concerns. Their child is either taking a long time to fall asleep at night, even older kids like 9, 10, 11 years old, unable to fall asleep at bedtime up until 10 or 11 o'clock, or getting up in the middle of the night, or requesting parent to come into their room, or needing parent to go, like they want to go sleep in mom and dad's bed, something like that. So that's what I get contacted for. Once we get started, we actually focus on the boundary, and then the sleep falls into place. And it's the same thing. And I bring up food again because food and sleep are just so interconnected. And so if a child's not sleeping well, they're probably also not eating very well. And once we set the boundary in place, then the food fixes itself. So when we talk about boundaries, and I talk about them with families, I'm talking about knowing where your lines are, right? And then holding the boundary and preserving your relationship. I think sometimes boundaries get a bad rap because they're like, but I just need to meet my kid where they're at. I need to it's my job to take care of them. It's my job to make sure that they have what they need. And that's absolutely correct. But they are a child and you are a parent, and you have a responsibility to set up a parameter of safety and security so your child knows what to expect from you. They know where they fit in the family circle, and they know how they're allowed to maneuver themselves so that they feel safe. With no boundaries, people have free reign, and there's very little safety. And kids that don't feel safe act out.
Yeah. Yeah. And, just when you're talking about this, you were making me flash back to when my oldest, we were going through sleep troubles, and again, did not have the support or the answers that we needed, and tried so many different things. And it just was a disaster because he did not know what to expect from us. Just like you said, boundaries tell them what to expect, where they fit in, they feel safe. And looking back now, I realized he didn't know what to expect, didn't feel safe, because every night it was a different thing, a different strategy.
Absolutely.
Right?
Because you feel desperate as a parent. You're like, we just have to get some sleep. This kid's not doing what they need to be doing. You feel frustrated. Your bandwidth is low. Your temper is high. And so you're like, well, what we did last night didn't work. So let's try something new. And kids are like, what are we doing? What's going on right now? What are the rules? Right. They don't know. And so they're going to, if you give them an inch, they're going to take a mile. Okay. Well, you don't know what the rules are. Neither do I. So let's just plow through this thing.
Yeah. Yeah. So boundaries are important. How do we begin to identify what our boundaries should be as parents? And then even to begin to implement them, especially if this is not something that we've been doing.
So I always ask families, is what you're doing now working for you? And the answer is almost always no. That's why they've contacted me. What we're doing now is not working. So something has to change. And we start talking about, well, what are you okay with? Are you okay if your child sleeps in your bed? Are you okay to lay on their bedroom floor for an hour before they fall asleep? What are things that you would like to do? And what are things that you no longer want to do? What do you feel will benefit your child the most? Are they benefiting from you laying on their floor in the middle of the night? What happens when they want to go to 5th grade sleepaway camp? Are you going to go and lay on the bedroom floor with them in the middle of the night? And so we talk about what's working and what's not working. Is it working for every member of the family? Because I talk to families where, dad's been sleeping on the couch for 6 months because there's no room in the bed. And they're like, I want my child to feel safe in their room. I want my child to sit down at dinner and eat with our family and eat what we are eating. I want my child to feel comfortable doing these things and to feel like they have some control. A lot of times with kids, this boundary pushing is just because they feel totally out of control. And it feels backward. We as parents are like, if I give them more options and free reign, then they'll feel like they have more control. But it's backward. Kids do so much better if they live within expectations because they know where they fit. They don't have to try to figure it out with guesswork. So once we establish what is not working, then we can talk about where the boundary will be. Okay, if you don't want your child to sleep in your bed, how can we set that boundary in a way that everyone feels comfortable with? They understand the expectation, including the child. And now we can begin to lay the groundwork for adjusting the boundary and then holding it.
So, and then that's the hard part, right?
That's
Holding
the hard part.
it.
Yep. Holding the
Especially
boundary.
in the middle of the night when we're tired and
Mhm.
it's just so much
Mhm.
easier just to say, okay, climb on in.
Yep. Holding it.
So
It's crucial.
how do we do that? Especially, like I said, it's one thing during the day. It's hard if you say you're going to eat what we're having for dinner, we're functioning, we're like awake, we're
Yep.
alive at 5 p.m. We can hold those boundaries decently. But what
Mhm.
about at 2 a.m. in the morning? How do we do this? What are your tips and how do you get people to do it?
Yeah, that's where, so it's all, I write a sleep plan for every family so that nobody has any guesswork. They have it written down and they can sit with their paper and go, okay, I am going to say these words because it's repetitive. I use a gradual retreat method for almost every family I work with. There are a few other methods out there, but gradual retreat is the one that generally people feel the most comfortable with and kids respond really well to. So they sit in the room with the child and then we slowly work our way out of the room over time. So it's kind of a bridge for the child from I need to sleep in my parents' room, or I have trouble falling asleep on my own, or I need to be up and down 150 times a night. So we're going to keep mom pretty close to you while you fall asleep. And then if you wake up in the middle of the night, we can address that. So we're holding the boundary. The parent has all the tools they need. If the child wakes up, this is what you do. If they try to get out of bed and I don't like this, I don't want to do this, this is what you say to them. These are the strategies that you can use. So parents have all the tools they need. And then when we talk about starting, I tell parents, I'm going to say, be consistent 150 times because once parents are consistent, kids go, are you serious? We're really going to do this. And as a parent, your job is to go, yes, I'm super, super serious. I love you and I'm here for you and I hear you, but I am very serious. And you hold the line and you do the things and over the course, and it really doesn't take long. It really doesn't take long. A couple of days, a toddler, an older child, sometimes it can take up to a week to establish those first boundaries. But after that initial pushback, they feel so much better. They feel so much better because they know what to expect. They know what happens next. They know what is expected of them and they know exactly the response they're going to get. And everybody just goes and they can relax. It's awesome.
And it's that quick? It's typically that quick.
Yep.
That's amazing. I wish I would have met you years ago.
Know what you mean?
And I think that even if your kiddos sleep through the night, you don't have sleep issues. I think this idea of the boundaries though applies to everything that we do as parents, right? I mean, it's not just sleep that we need to set these boundaries and make our children understand the expectations of them, the rules, the guidelines, and what happens when they do or don't follow them, right?
Well, because when I actually work with an older child in elementary school or older, we work on boundaries during the day for a whole week before we talk about sleep. Because like I say, sleep is actually secondary. So once we set the boundary during the day about behavior, backtalk, sarcasm, disobedience, I refuse to do this, I refuse to do that. Once we set the boundary during the day, it's so much easier to then add sleep into those boundaries because it's a secondary issue. The issue is I, as a parent, have no boundary and the child doesn't know where they fit and they don't know what is acceptable and what's not acceptable. Once we establish all of that and everybody just feels a little bit more calm, there's less anxiety in the home. There's less of this, that didn't work. What do we do now? That didn't work. Well, they're losing their mind. Well, now I'm upset. Once we establish this and we bring everybody in, then we can address some of these other issues.
So how do we communicate this with our kids? I mean, obviously this is a change that they're going to experience. And our whole premise, right, is building these communication skills in our kids. How do we begin to communicate about boundaries? And also a side question of that. Well, let's talk about that first and then I'll get to the end.
Okay. So once with older kids, really anybody over the age of 4 or 5, I ask to meet the child as well. And so I give parents in the sleep plan a whole list of things that they can say to their kids because I want the child to be aware of the changes because otherwise it's not fair. And we've just like blindsided everybody. If the child is older, then I also want to talk to them. I do almost all consultations virtually. So it's usually over a Zoom meeting, which is why it's easier with an older child. But we talk about what's happening. This is what's happening in your sleep. Tell me how you feel about it. Do you feel tired? And we talk about how their bodies feel. We talk about how they're feeling emotionally. How is school going for you? How do you feel with your friends? We talk about how things are working in their lives. And I like to try to pull out a few of the things that they wish that would change. And then we talk about, okay, if you want to change these things, then something else has to change, right? Because change kind of dominoes. So then I talk to them about what we're going to do next. This is what it's going to look like. We want to make these changes because we love you and we want you to be healthy and happy. And I know it can feel really scary to do new things because change can feel really scary. Sometimes it feels easier for families to stay in the known, even though the known isn't working, at least it's known. As soon as I make change, now I don't know what to expect. What will happen? There's a lot of anxiety, especially from parents, before we begin the program, because there's just, well, what if they do this? Well, what if they do this? What if they react this way? And I understand that anxiety, but I try really hard to communicate to parents. Change is always hard and that's okay. And acknowledging that it's difficult is acceptable. Yes, this is hard for everyone. Your child is going to tell you, I don't like this because change is hard. And your job as a parent is not to tamp down those feelings. No, it's okay. And it's also not to give in and go, oh, you don't like this? Okay, never mind. It's your job is to go, I hear that you feel scared. I hear that you feel uncertain and you don't know what to expect. I am here for you to support you during this. We're going to make our way through this together and hold your boundary. You can be heard and seen and still have boundaries.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And do you find often that there's an underlying issue when it comes to, kind of back to the sleep thing? Is there often an underlying issue that's causing problems for them to be able to go to sleep alone or sleep through the night? Or is this just a typical thing that a lot of children go through?
A lot of kids go through this. Most often I see it either if a child has been co-sleeping as an infant and parents didn't make the transition to an independent bed, like their own sleep space. Mm-hmm. Another issue that happens is when a child moves from a crib to a toddler bed. And now that new freedom and boundaries weren't established when that change happened, because the crib railings provide a very physical boundary. And when the child either starts to climb out of the crib or they grow out of the crib, or a lot of parents, when their child turns about 2, their parents either have another baby or they oh, you're such a big boy now. Let's get you a big boy bed. And they don't lay the groundwork to shift into that freedom. I can get up and move around and I can come out and I can talk to you and I have access. This is amazing. Once we do that, then we start to see some sleep troubles. The other one that can happen is as kids get older, cognitively, I call them being a big little. They are old enough and big enough to have an imagination and listen to conversations and maybe be in the room when something that they just don't have the cognitive ability to understand, like TV or stories or adult conversation, but they're little and they do not have the cognitive ability to process what they're hearing and seeing. So then we start seeing nightmares, afraid of the dark, monsters. That starts to pop up between 3 and 5 years old. And that's another one that parents don't hold a boundary, because you want to be there for your child if they're telling you they're afraid. And so it's hard. How do I do that? How do I tell them, you don't have to be afraid. There's not really a monster, but also I love you. And so those are the biggest issues that then just kind of domino. And before you know it, you've got an 8-year-old in your bed.
Right. Well, and I mean, you can see why this is so important to address early on, but I think it's important to know too, for anybody who's listening that has older kids and dealing with this now, that it's not too late.
It's not too late.
You can definitely fix this. You're not alone. And there are experts out there like Stephanie that can certainly help. So Stephanie, another thing you talk about is being an emotional barometer. Mm-hmm. What does that mean?
So I tell families that I work with that there is a reason for the adage, if mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy. Because we as parents kind of dictate the emotional wellness in our home. We set the tone. And so if and that can feel like a lot of pressure for moms, because I can't ever have a bad day. I can't ever have downtime. And that's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is when you interact with your child, they are going to feed off of your emotion. So I'll use sleep as an example because that's what I do primarily. When we get started and we implement all of these changes, whether your child is 6 months old or 10 years old, I tell parents that the change is going to feel scary. Your job as a parent is to go into this with as much calm and confidence as you can muster. I am here for you. We have a plan. I know exactly what to do. And that's where my job comes in, is to make sure parents feel equipped and they have the tools. Because if they go into it going, I don't think this is going to work. They're going to be really upset. And then I'm going to be really upset. And then I don't know what's going to happen. And this builds and builds and builds and builds. And so then your child is picking up on this energy that you're throwing around, and bedtime is way harder. And they don't even know why. They just know that you're upset about something. So if you can go into whatever conversation you're having with your kid, whether it's about bedtime, it's about, I asked you to clean your room the other day and you completely lost your mind. Or it's about, I asked you to be home by 10 o'clock and you disregarded my rule. When you go into it with calm and confidence, your child will pick up on that energy and the conversation can go more smoothly.
And I think that is one of the hardest parts for me personally in my household with the ages of kids I have right now, is remaining calm in a situation whenever they have an attitude back. Even if you won't go into it calm and they jump back in not calm. Mm-hmm. But I will say I have found lately in implementing a lot of the strategies that I've learned from different experts on this podcast of, if I do remain calm, they will calm down very quickly. Mm-hmm. Which, I mean, that's been very amazing to me. It seems like, because it's such a simple thing, yeah. Right? But it is not easy to.
No.
Sorry about that. I just knocked over my microphone.
It's not easy.
It's not easy to actually implement, right? The idea sounds so easy, but the implementation is not.
No, because we're human beings and we have our own emotions. And I had a bad day and I'm annoyed with my dog, and the person that cut me off in traffic was terrible. And my boss, we're living our own lives. We are our own human beings, but I'm also responsible for all of these people in my house. And so when I can come into this and, I talk to parents about when the sleep is huge, right? Because if you're not getting enough sleep, your emotional bandwidth has gone way down. And so as a grown-up, if you are getting 5 or less hours of sleep, then it's the equivalent of having about 5 beers in your system. Your responses are low. Your ability to communicate is inhibited. And so if you are not getting sleep and your child is also not getting enough sleep, the ability that you have to communicate has gone out the window because nobody has the bandwidth for it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really interesting and shocking statistic too. Mm-hmm. So, for the people hearing this, there's that's me. I'm not getting enough sleep, right? There is a help. You don't have to continue this way.
You don't have to. No.
So, Stephanie, one last thing for you. In this kind of weaves through everything you've already told us, but about parenting with consistency and with love is a big part of what you push, right? What you encourage. Yep. And I mean, and obviously that's super important. We've discussed the different ways, but what are your tips for remembering this and doing this? I mean, obviously we love our kids. We all are uniform in that way. We love our children. We just don't always act like it in the moment. So what are your tips for that?
So I have found this with my kids as they've gotten older, because like we've said, each child is totally different. And so it can be frustrating as a parent. I've been on this journey with my daughter, who's my oldest, and she's a senior in high school. We're getting ready. We're talking about college and applications and her moving, I'm launching her, moving out of my house. And I've learned this whole skill set, parenting her and her personality. And my son is a completely different child. He doesn't need any of the skills that I learned with my oldest. And so now I have to have this whole new skill set. And then I have my third child who is a completely different person, and she needs me to interact with her in a totally different way. And now I have a 5-year-old who needs me to interact with her in a totally different way. So when we approach our children as individuals, I think sometimes parents can feel overwhelmed by that. How do I finally figured this out with this one, but now I don't know how to do this with you.
Yeah.
And that's again where the boundary is so important. In our family, we have these boundaries and they apply to everyone. And you fit here. We all fit here. There's room for everybody. So when we talk about approaching our kids with consistency and love, it's a delicate balance between having family boundaries where everybody fits and everybody belongs. But my mantra for the teenage years has been preserve the relationship. I love my kids, and my daughters are going to be different from my son. And my son has pushed me in ways that my daughters never did. And he and I will sit down and I will say, this is not working. Something needs to change. So we will talk about what he can do, how I can support him, because I believe that kids need to be able to fail sometimes and learn these naturally hard lessons. But when we approach parenting with consistency in our boundaries and love through preserving the relationship with your child, at the end of the day, it's not going to be perfect and it will sometimes feel really messy, but you have a kid that knows where they belong. They have a safe place in your home and they can come to you when they have a problem. And I think that feels like a win.
Absolutely. Preserve the relationship. I am going to put that on a sticky note on my mirror because I mean, it's absolutely true. We, we have these little babies and that grow up to be little big kids, like you said, and they love us and they want to be around us. And we have this super strong relationship and strong connection. And as they start to become more individualistic and break away a little bit, that's where we feel that friction. And whether it's because they're teenagers and they have attitudes or because our mama hearts hurt too, that we're not always as needed or as outwardly loved as we used to be. And all of that causes friction, I think, for us. So preserving the relationship before, like you said, before they launch out into the world is so crucial, so important.
My friend and I have we've decided there's not an appropriate word for it in the English language. So we call it the mom happy sad. I have the mom happy sad. My oldest child is a senior and I have the mom happy sad. I'm happy for her because this is exactly where she should be. If she weren't in this place at her age, I would be worried and we would be doing other things, but I'm so sad. So sad. I told my husband, I feel like I'm mourning. I'm mourning the end of this chapter in our lives. And so preserving my relationship with her has become paramount. But at the same time, I have to hold our boundary. She's getting older and she's exercising independence. She comes and goes and she's got her driver's license and she has a job. The other day I came home and I was like, where is Addie? And everybody was like, we don't know because she's just doing her thing. And that has been a really, really hard parenting transition.
Yeah.
But the other day she came to me and she was like, I understand why you have the rules that you have. I see it. It's because you love me and want me to be safe. And I was like, that's all I've ever wanted.
Like mic drop, right?
Huge, huge parenting payout. Huge.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
That's amazing. That is exactly. That's all you need to hear to make you feel like $1 million. So
yeah. And then I was like, could you just tell your brothers and sisters? Could you just pass the word? Because they're coming up behind you going, this is ridiculous. And you're the strictest of all my parents and nobody else has to do all this stuff. And I'm like, yep, I'm the worst. Love ya.
And it's okay. It's okay to be the worst, right?
It is.
It's okay to be the worst.
Makes me feel like a good mom.
Exactly. And I love the mom happy sad. You're right. I knew exactly what you were going to say when you started talking about that because we all know that feeling. We all know the mom happy sad. So, well, Stephanie, this has been really enlightening. And I know that there are people out there that are like, I need her help. So Stephanie, we'll obviously link to all of your socials and your website, but tell us a little bit more about what you offer. I mean, we've talked about your sleep plans and all that, but just give us a little bit more snippet of what you offer and what people need to do to get in touch with you.
Yeah, no, I'm on Facebook and I'm on Instagram and I have a website, shsleepconsulting.com. And I offer private coaching packages. I also offer like little mini sessions if you just have questions, but I offer free sleep assessments. I want to talk to anybody who wants to talk to me. So you can get on my website, book a calendar appointment with me, and we'll talk for 15 to 20 minutes about what's going on, what you want to change. Do you think you need help, and are we a good fit? So that's the best way to get started. It's completely free of charge to you because I believe all parents deserve to check in. All parents deserve support because this is hard stuff. Parenting is no joke. And sleep is such a huge component of our lives that's where I tend to focus, but I also incorporate these boundaries and this parent coaching in because it really is all of a piece. You can't address one thing without addressing the other. And it's really worked beautifully, and I enjoy it so much. I've worked with so many just incredible families, and hearing the relief that they feel at the end of our time together is just the best, because they're like, oh my gosh, they're happier. I'm happier. I know what to do now. And they walk away with tools in their toolbox. That's the whole thing.
That's awesome. That is so awesome. And just one final thing, whenever you were talking about earlier, you said when we first had kids, the internet really wasn't, I mean, it was there, but social media was not, and all of those things. And the old adage was sleep when the baby sleeps.
Yep.
And that was the feedback.
That was the advice.
The advice that we had, which we know is not possible, even especially if you have more than one kid.
Nope.
So what you offer is so needed and so necessary for so many families. Again, I wish I had had you in my life years ago because we struggled through it. But again, anybody listening, you do not have to struggle through it. There is a solution. So thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate everything. And of course, we will link to everything in the show notes so you can go check out Stephanie's website and socials.
Thank you so much. This was great.
If you are looking for more ways to build communication skills in your kids, grab our free mini lesson on how to craft a polished and professional speech out of thin air, along with 52 fun prompts so your kids can practice every single week. You can find that along with info about our upcoming public speaking and debate courses for kids at greencommunicationsedu.com.